They told you to find yourself, as if you were some lost object waiting to be discovered under a rock in Bali or buried inside a self-help book. They said the answers are out there somewhere, if you just keep traveling, meditating, journaling, healing, fixing, upgrading. But what if I told you the idea of finding yourself is the very illusion that keeps you lost? That the more you chase this mythical, true self, the further you run from who you really are. This isn't a call to settle, it's a call to wake up. Because maybe the self you're chasing isn't hiding. Maybe it never existed the way you were told. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most liberating thing you could realize. So before you book your next spiritual retreat, let's talk about what this whole finding yourself journey might really be distracting you from. Who am I? It's the sacred question of our times. But it's also the most commercialized. Identity has become a product, and finding yourself has turned into a performance. Instagram tells you to discover your aesthetic. LinkedIn tells you to brand your personality. Therapists talk about inner child work while algorithms sell you 5 steps to self-actualization. The truth is, we are being trained to turn our sense of self into a never-ending project, something that's always broken, always needing improvement, always just out of reach. But the problem isn't that we haven't found ourselves. The problem is that we've been sold a lie, that the self is a final destination, a clear shape, a fixed truth. What if the self isn't meant to be found at all? What if the very idea of a true self is just another way to control us, subtly, beautifully, and completely? Part 1: The origins of the self-discovery myth. Let's go back. Not just a few years or even a few centuries, but way back, before psychology, before capitalism, before hashtags like authentic self. There was no finding yourself because there was no concept of a self that needed to be found. People didn't ask, who am I really? They asked things like, what does the tribe need from me? Or what gods must I honor? Identity wasn't a solo mission, it was a communal assignment. In ancient societies, your self was handed to you like a robe you wore your whole life. You were the son of a carpenter, the wife of a chieftain, the oracle's apprentice. Your role was your identity. You didn't wake up wondering what your passion was. You got up and did what needed to be done. You didn't need a journal to process your feelings. You had rituals, seasons, and stories passed down through generations to explain who you were and why it mattered. But something changed. Enter the Enlightenment, the age of reason, science, and the glorification of the individual. Suddenly, people were no longer just members of a group. They were thinkers, dreamers, rational beings. Sounds empowering, right? It was. But it also introduced a new anxiety. When you strip away communal roles and divine instructions, you're left with a terrifying question. If I don't have to be who they told me to be, then who am I? That question echoed louder as religion began to lose its grip on daily life, especially in the Western world. With fewer collective myths to anchor our identity, we turned inward. The soul-searching began, but not all at once. First came Freud, telling us we had unconscious desires. Then came Jung, whispering about archetypes and the shadow self. The inner world became a map, and we became explorers of our own psychological terrain. Fast forward to the 20th century, 2 world wars, a few industrial revolutions, and the birth of modern capitalism later, the self had become more than just a mystery to solve. It became a product. Identity turned into a project. Not something you inherited, but something you built. You didn't just live a life, you curated one. The post-war era in America is a perfect case study. After the trauma of global conflict, the West craved purpose, stability, meaning. But instead of returning to rigid religious or nationalistic identities, a new idea took root: the individual self as the ultimate truth. Be yourself, express yourself, find yourself. It sounded liberating, and for a while it was. But culture doesn't just evolve, it gets monetized. As the advertising industry exploded, it tapped into this desire for self-definition. You weren't just buying a car, you were buying status. You weren't just drinking coffee, you were drinking a lifestyle. Your choices weren't just choices, they were reflections of who you were, or wanted to be, or wanted others to believe you were. And so the self became a brand. You were expected to have a personality, ideally one that could be neatly packaged and sold. Are you a bold adventurer, a sensitive intellectual, a quirky minimalist with a love of Scandinavian furniture? Choose your aesthetic, choose your identity. But hurry, this season's version of you might go out of style. Even rebellion became marketable. You think you're escaping the mainstream by joining a counterculture? Surprise, the market already predicted that. It has the clothes, the slogans, and the coffee table books ready for you. Your anti-mainstream identity is just another target demographic. Then came the digital age. Social media didn't create the obsession with selfhood, but it supercharged it. Now everyone has a platform, a curated feed, a highlight reel of their most authentic moments. But let's be honest, how authentic can you be when you're constantly performing? We started measuring self-worth in likes, shares, and followers. We turned our lives into content. We started performing growth and healing and authenticity, not because we felt those things, but because it looked good online. The pressure to find yourself morphed into the pressure to perform a version of yourself that's palatable, marketable, lovable. And here's the paradox. The more we try to find ourselves through all these external signals, products, brands, aesthetics, algorithms, the more lost we feel. Because deep down, we suspect the truth, that the self we're trying to find might not exist in the way we were promised. What if there is no fixed, final you waiting to be uncovered? What if your identity isn't hiding at the bottom of a yoga retreat, or a career breakthrough, or a new haircut? What if the whole idea of finding yourself is just another beautiful distraction, a shiny spiritual way of staying stuck? This isn't to say that reflection is pointless or that growth is a scam, far from it. But it's worth asking, who benefits from me believing that I'm a mystery in need of solving? Who profits when I feel broken, incomplete, or off track? And what if I'm not missing anything? What if I'm not lost? The myth of self-discovery isn't inherently evil. It can be a doorway to deeper awareness, to courage, to liberation, but only if we realize it's a metaphor, not a map. You don't find yourself like a missing sock. You unfold, you evolve, you experiment, you shed skins and try on new ones. So maybe the question isn't who am I? Maybe the better question is, who am I becoming right now? And even more daring, who would I be if I stopped needing to know? The myth of finding yourself is seductive because it offers the illusion of clarity. But life is not a fixed identity. It's a process, a movement, a becoming. And in that fluid space, where nothing is certain and everything is possible, you might just realize you were never lost. You were just told to look in all the wrong places. Part 2, the inner trap. You are not a puzzle. Let's start with the feeling. The quiet belief that something is missing inside you. That if you just did enough inner work, meditated enough, journaled hard enough, went on the right retreat, or read the right book, you'd finally crack the code. You'd unlock the real you, the authentic self, buried beneath the layers of trauma, guilt, anxiety, and bad decisions. That's the story. That's the trap. But here's the uncomfortable truth. What if there is no final version of you hiding beneath it all? What if you're not a riddle to solve, but a reality to live? The idea that you're a puzzle waiting to be assembled assumes there's a correct picture, a completed version of you that exists somewhere in the ideal future. It's comforting, but it's also imprisoning. Because when you believe in the true self model, everything in your life becomes a diagnostic tool. Did that conversation feel off? Must be misalignment. Didn't like your job? Wrong path. Relationship didn't work out? Still haven't found your true self. You begin seeing every discomfort not as a normal part of being human, but as a sign that something's wrong with you. And so you keep digging, keep fixing, keep optimizing. Self-help becomes self-surveillance. You start thinking of yourself in software terms, always debugging, always updating. Your soul turns into a project. Therapy becomes a job. Your growth becomes a checklist. And worst of all, you start postponing your life. You wait to live until you're healed, until you've found yourself, until you're ready. But newsflash, you're never going to feel completely ready. And that's okay. This mindset isn't your fault. It's cultural. We live in an age of improvement. There's a billion-dollar industry telling you that you're almost, but not quite there. That your best self is just one purchase, one practice, one transformation away. But when is it ever enough? If healing is a path, why do so many people seem to get lost on it? Here's the radical shift. What if you're not broken? What if growth doesn't mean sculpting yourself into some ideal version, but accepting your contradictions as part of your wholeness? What if instead of constantly asking, "How can I become my best self?" you asked, "What part of me needs compassion right now?" When you start from the assumption that you're incomplete, even your growth is built on shame. You're trying to become something so that you'll finally be worthy of love, respect, and rest. But if you can embrace yourself as already worthy, as already whole, you stop treating life like a rehearsal. Ironically, trying too hard to be authentic makes you fake. You adopt spiritual routines, talk in therapy language, curate your vulnerability for social media. It's not your fault. You're doing what you were taught. You've been told that authenticity means having clear boundaries, a morning routine, a 5-year plan, and a trauma-informed vocabulary. But real authenticity isn't impressive. It's messy. It's inconsistent. It's admitting you don't know what you want. It's being quiet when everyone else is shouting. It's changing your mind without explanation. It's failing without making it a lesson. It's being painfully, beautifully human. And here's another twist. The self isn't found in solitude. It's revealed in relationship, in conflict, in laughter, in failure, in the mundane. You don't find yourself by sitting alone on a mountain, though that can be helpful. You find yourself in the way you show up to the everyday mess of life. You find pieces of yourself in other people, in the way they love you, challenge you, disappoint you. You are not a fixed identity. You're a living process, a breathing event, and your contradictions don't make you broken, they make you real. The idea of a final self is comforting but suffocating. Because the moment you think you've found yourself, you'll start defending it. You'll become rigid, defensive, terrified of change. So here's the liberating thought. Maybe you don't need to find yourself. Maybe you just need to stop running from who you already are. Maybe the self isn't something to capture or define, but something to inhabit, moment by moment, with grace, with curiosity. You are not a puzzle to be solved. You are a presence to be lived. Let that be enough. Part 3. The false idol of authenticity. We live in a culture obsessed with authenticity, and yet, ironically, we've turned it into a performance. The moment you try to be authentic on command, you've already stepped out of it. You're thinking about how to be real, which means you're no longer just being. The word authenticity is everywhere now, on podcasts and influencer captions, in job interviews, on dating profiles. Be your true self. Speak your truth. Show up fully. But peel back the layers and you'll see that what we call authenticity often has little to do with truth and everything to do with image. We're taught to brand our personalities, not just in professional spaces like LinkedIn, but in our personal lives too. There's pressure to be an open book, but only if the pages are well written. Vulnerability is welcome as long as it's tidy. We're encouraged to talk about our trauma, but it has to be the healed version. The inspirational takeaway, the neatly captioned before and after story. We don't just want to be seen, we want to be seen in the best possible light. And here lies the danger. When authenticity becomes another aesthetic, another layer of identity to curate, it stops being authentic at all. It becomes another performance. And performances, no matter how raw, still have an audience in mind. This is not to say people are being fake on purpose. In fact, most of us are desperately trying to be real. But we've been taught that being real means being liked, that our truth is only worth sharing if it's palatable, if it earns praise, if it doesn't make others uncomfortable. So we filter even our rawness. We show the parts of ourselves that feel deep, but not too deep, broken, but in a beautiful, cinematic way. Take social media, for example. It's the great amplifier of this paradox. You can post a crying selfie with a vulnerable caption and still be playing the game. Because you chose the angle, you edited the lighting, you waited for the right moment. There's nothing wrong with that. But let's not confuse it with pure self-expression. There's always a bit of theater involved. Even in spiritual circles where authenticity is supposedly sacred, the performance persists. You wear mala beads and say you're holding space. You talk about being present while mentally crafting your next post. You go on a silent retreat and come back with a photo album. The ego doesn't die, it just puts on a different costume. So what is authenticity really? Maybe it's not something you achieve, maybe it's something you surrender to. It's not about being raw or edgy or unfiltered. It's not about saying everything you think or feel. It's about being rooted, present, responsive instead of reactive, It's about knowing when to speak and when to be silent, without constantly asking, how will this be perceived? Authenticity isn't an act, it's an absence of acting. It's the quiet honesty that comes when you're not trying to impress anyone, not even yourself. It's when your actions match your values. Even when no one's watching, it's when you're in conversation and not rehearsing what to say next. It's when you laugh, not to fill silence, not to please, but because you genuinely found something funny. And yet, in a world where attention is currency, authenticity is hard to sustain. We crave recognition, we want to be affirmed, and so we adjust ourselves, subtly, constantly. We smile when we don't mean it, we nod when we disagree. We post the version of the moment that fits our narrative. This doesn't mean you're fake, it means you're human, social, adaptive. But it also means that finding moments of true authenticity requires intention, and often discomfort, because being real doesn't always make you likable. Sometimes it makes you inconvenient. Sometimes it means being misunderstood. The pressure to be a consistent self, a coherent, on-brand person is enormous. But people aren't brands. We're contradictions, mosaics. We can be generous and selfish, wise and foolish, loving and withdrawn, all within the same day. The demand to present a polished, unified identity is exhausting, and it's dishonest. You want to be real? Start by letting yourself be inconsistent. Stop trying to live your truth like it's a polished TED Talk. Your truth is in the awkward pauses, the contradictions, the parts of you that don't photograph well. Real authenticity isn't glamorous, it's not always inspirational. Sometimes it's sitting with your discomfort, admitting you were wrong, saying I don't know, saying nothing at all. It's letting go of the need to be impressive, to be inspiring, to be anything other than what you are right here, right now. So maybe the most radical thing you can do isn't to find your authentic self. Maybe it's to stop trying to look authentic and start allowing yourself to just be, quietly, inconsistently, honestly. Because the moment you stop performing authenticity, that's when you might actually begin to live it. Part 4. How society shapes the self. Let's be honest, most of what you call you is borrowed. Not in a malicious way, but in a deeply human one. We are creatures of imitation. From the moment we're born, we mirror. We mimic the tones of our parents, the habits of our peers, the values of our culture. Our preferences, beliefs, even our emotional reactions are shaped long before we call them our own. You didn't choose your native language, or your accent, or the first songs you thought were beautiful. These things chose you, or rather, they were given to you by your environment. And as you grew, the world continued to mold your sense of self. You adapted to survive, to belong, to be safe. This isn't inherently bad. Adaptation is what allows us to connect, to cooperate, to coexist. But the danger comes when we mistake our social conditioning for our authentic identity. We confuse what we've learned with what we are. We call our preferences personality, even though many of them are simply rehearsed behaviors in response to approval and rejection. Take a moment to ask, how much of what you believe is truly yours? The way you dress, the way you talk, the things you find funny or offensive, where did those come from? Most of the time, they're echoes. Cultural downloads, reflexes shaped by repetition and reinforcement. Even rebellion is often a form of conformity. Think of subcultures, goths, punks, minimalists, spiritual seekers. Each claims uniqueness, but each also has its uniform, its lingo, its unwritten rules. You might think you're escaping the mainstream, but you're often just joining a different tribe, with its own standards of realness. And this isn't to say you're fake. It's to say you're fluid, shaped, social. And that's okay. The problem arises when you believe that you've finally found yourself inside one of these scripts and cling to it as your identity. Because once you do, growth becomes harder. You're no longer free to change. You're loyal to the image of who you think you are. This societal scripting doesn't stop at subcultures. It extends to gender roles, family expectations, professional norms, and even emotional expression. Some cultures teach you to cry quietly. Others teach you to toughen up. Some say ambition is noble. Others say it's selfish. These frameworks become invisible cages. You think you're acting freely, but you're just choosing from a menu someone else wrote. Let's look at success. Who told you what a successful life looks like? A degree, a job title, a family, a home. But these aren't universal truths, they're social stories. Stories that have been repeated so often they feel like facts. And if you fail to live up to them, you feel like a failure. Not because you actually failed, but because you internalize someone else's scoreboard. Or consider your emotions. Are you allowed to be angry, tender, ambitious? Who gave you permission or took it away? Society doesn't just shape what we do. It shapes what we feel allowed to feel. Now layer in race, class, religion, and media. The complexity multiplies. The world doesn't just suggest identities, it prescribes them. Stereotypes are identity shortcuts handed out like masks. If you don't wear yours correctly, you're seen as inauthentic, even dangerous. So how do you reclaim your sense of self in a world that keeps trying to define it for you? You start by questioning the script. You become aware of the borrowed language in your mouth, the secondhand dreams in your mind. You get curious about your reactions, about your desires, about your guilt and pride. This process isn't clean. It's not a one-time event. It's an ongoing practice of noticing. Noticing when you're playing a role. Noticing when you're defending a belief you inherited but never questioned. Noticing when you're shrinking to fit someone else's version of you. And from that awareness, you begin to experiment. You try new responses. You wear different emotional clothes. You explore the silence behind the performance. You ask, again and again, what's actually true for me? And you stay open to the fact that the answer might change. Here's a paradox. The more you loosen your grip on identity, the more you begin to feel real. Not because you've found your true self, but because you've stopped pretending you had to. You're no longer performing you. You're participating in life, in real time, with all the awkwardness, messiness, and magic that involves. Society will always try to tell you who you are, sometimes with love, sometimes with manipulation. But you don't have to swallow the script. You can revise it, rewrite it, or throw it out entirely. You are not a fixed character in someone else's story. You're the author of your own unfolding, and the page is always blank again tomorrow. Part 5. So what now? If there's no self to find. If you followed this far, you might be wondering, if there's no fixed self to find, no hidden truth waiting in the jungle of your mind, no perfectly aligned you just around the next emotional breakthrough, then what's the point of any of it? Let's pause right there, because this is where the conversation gets truly liberating. You've been taught to think of identity as a goal, something solid, something to define, defend, and display. But what if that model was never designed for your freedom, only your predictability? What if the truth is this? You are not a noun, you are a verb. You are not a thing to be discovered, you are a process to be lived. This shift in thinking changes everything. You stop treating life like a scavenger hunt for who you really are, and you start approaching it as a creative act. Each moment is an opportunity not to reveal the hidden self, but to participate in shaping who you are becoming. Not with perfection, not with a master plan, but with presence. When there's no rigid identity to uphold, you're free to be wrong, free to evolve, free to contradict yourself. You no longer need to get it right, you just need to get real. You stop anxiously managing your image and start responding to life, authentically, moment by moment. This isn't an escape from meaning, it's an invitation into it. Because when you release the pressure to find yourself, you can finally start experiencing yourself. You stop asking, am I being true to who I am? And start asking, is this honest right now? You stop chasing clarity and start embracing aliveness. What does that look like in practice? It's messy, it's non-linear, it's beautiful. It's waking up some days feeling lost and realizing that's just part of being alive. It's letting go of your 5-year plan because it no longer fits. It's laughing too loud. It's failing in public. It's showing up unsure, but still showing up. It's choosing action over analysis, choosing relationship over retreat, choosing to participate in your life instead of waiting to feel like the perfect version of yourself before you begin. It's realizing that becoming is always happening. You don't have to earn your right to exist. You already belong. And strangely, this letting go doesn't make you more chaotic. It makes you more grounded. Because now, your identity isn't held together by fear or branding or performance. It's held together by choice, by presence, by your willingness to show up, not as the final version, but as a real one. You become less fixated on being impressive and more focused on being available, to love, to wonder, to discomfort, to growth. You stop defining yourself by your past and start relating to your potential. You stop asking life to give you a mirror and start asking it to give you a canvas. This is the paradox. The more you let go of needing to find yourself, the more yourself you begin to feel. Because now you're not confined by definitions. You're animated by direction. You're not a statue waiting to be revealed. You're clay, always becoming. And that becoming doesn't need to be profound. Sometimes it's just paying attention, taking a breath, asking a better question. Sometimes the most you thing you can do is to admit you don't know who you are and still move forward. So if you feel lost, maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're just free. Free to invent, free to risk, free to live a life that's not about self-discovery, but self-invention. The path isn't linear. The map keeps changing. But here's the secret. You were never meant to arrive. You were meant to explore. You are not a finished product. You are a living question. And that's not a problem to solve. That's a mystery to embrace. The lie of finding yourself is seductive because it promises clarity in a chaotic world. It makes you believe there's a final answer, that one day you'll arrive and finally feel whole. But life doesn't work like that. You are not a destination. You are a journey. Messy, beautiful, evolving. The more you cling to the idea of a solid, fixed identity, the more trapped you become. But if you dare to let go of the need to define yourself, you'll realize something deeper. You were never lost. You were just looking for something that never needed to be found. So stop trying to be you. Start being here. Live fully. Speak honestly. Love recklessly. And trust that who you are will show up. Not as a product, not as a brand, but as a presence. Fluid, unfinished, real. If this message hit something deep inside you, don't just scroll on. Like, share, and subscribe for more content that questions the myths we live by. And tell me in the comments, what does being yourself really mean to you when no one's watching?